11 is the time. I mean, I tweeted yesterday that I couldn't yet begin to contemplate the idea that they wouldn't change the visa application system, that they wouldn't change the process. The question I asked was whether or not they'd do it before or after the country had realised that what is happening to Ukrainian people at the moment, Ukrainian refugees, is exactly what was ordered by the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. It's exactly what the sort of UKipification of British politics has done to us. I find this astonishing. I'm afraid I'm not going to stop banging this drum because it's so important. If you don't learn from the past, you are condemned forever to repeat it. What you are seeing unfold now with our shameful response to the Ukrainian refugee crisis, 1,000 applications processed out of 2 million refugees. What you're seeing now is deliberate and designed. This is what you or they wanted. And it's a bit like Glastonbury now. It's the opposite of Woodstock, isn't it? If everyone that said they went to Woodstock had gone to Woodstock, Woodstock would have sunk under the weight of humanity. But you will struggle to find anybody now who says, this is exactly what I wanted. In fact, you'll find people in this line of work who are now pretending to be furious about the state of play regarding Ukrainians, even though they've spent their working life calling for it. Okay, we've got to stop it. We've got to pull up the drawbridge. We've got to take back control. Shut the back door. They're coming in through the back door. German Jews are flooding into this country, and the Daily Mail has been pointing it out for a long time now. That's from 1938, but it could have been from a fortnight ago. Just swap the word German Jews for your refugees of choice. Until your refugees of choice became Ukrainian, at which point, quite astonishingly, members of the party that is in the process of passing the most inhumane refugee legislation that any Western country has contemplated in a generation, members of that party are having conniptions, having hissy fits, getting angry, and indeed their cheerleaders and their client journalists in the British media are furious about Priti Patel and Liz Truss and the rest of them. They tend not to mention Boris Johnson. I don't know if you've noticed this. You can't mention the big dog. Don't mention the big dog. Let's just go after the women. That'll work. So the man who put them both in post, the man who is reduced to promoting sycophants and inadequates because his entire administration is built upon the lie of Brexit, the man reduced to promoting sycophants and inadequates, he's golden, he's fine. He's under police caution at the moment. But don't mention him, whatever you do. By the way, John Bercow is a bully. But don't mention Boris Johnson, whatever you do. No, just go after Patel, go after Truss, go after Daniel Kawczynski. Don't mention the big dog. Operation Save Big Dog still very much underway. The man presiding over all of this. The man 2 weeks late sanctioning Russian oligarchs. The man who made Priti Patel Foreign Secretary and ordered her to keep the red meat lot happy. Appease the racists. Let's not beat about the bush. Appease the racists in our own party. Get me a refugee policy that the racists will be happy with. And Priti Patel delivered. It's not signed, sealed and delivered yet, but she's pretty close to it. There it is. Here's a refugee policy that the racists will be happy with. We won't let any in. So here's Sir Edward Lee. The people of Lincolnshire have done enough. I think we should congratulate the Home Secretary, the Home Secretary on her refugee policy, and the idea that we should be doing any more. No, said Sir Edward Lee, the Lord of Gammon. We've done enough. The people of Lincolnshire have done enough. And the MP sitting next to him, who 3 weeks ago, if the word Syrian had replaced the word Ukrainian, would have agreed wholeheartedly, are suddenly having a fit of the vapours. It's like their moral compass has got too close to a magnet and started spinning around indiscriminately. And don't even get me started on the newspaper columnists and commentators who absolutely demanded precisely the sort of refugee policy that's currently being enacted across the world and are now furious that the refugee policy they demanded is being enacted across the world. So when I said, I wonder whether they'll start climbing down or I wonder whether they'll start changing the policy before or after, everybody has realised that what Priti Patel's policy is doing, what Boris Johnson's refugee policy is doing, is exactly what it said on the tin. Then, or will they wait? Or will they do it quickly? Will they do it before or after everybody has realised that this refugee policy is precisely the one that the UK ordered in 2, if not 3 successive elections? And then I said, I can't contemplate the possibility that they'll leave it the same. Because you've got to look after yourself sometimes. You've got to look into the abyss, but not jump. And so even yesterday or the day before, whenever I said that to you, I didn't want to go there. I could not believe that this country would not begin to dilute the disgusting refugee approach that was being taken. And thankfully, the dilution has begun, albeit that it's not going to kick in until next Tuesday. So eligible Ukrainian nationals, which I think still means family members, will be able to apply online instead of having to. And remember, the Home Secretary denied on Monday that this was happening. She didn't deny it 5 years ago. She didn't deny it in 2019 or 2012. She denied on Monday that Ukrainian families were getting to Calais and having to turn around and go back to processing centres in Paris or in Brussels. She did it on Monday. And she lied about it. She lied. So now those processing centres can be bypassed by eligible Ukrainian nationals who've managed to come out of the country with their passport or their ID card. They will be able to apply for a visa virtually. They'll be able to do it online without having to visit a visa application centre. So when she complained to Mihal, I'm going to say that 3 times because I always mispronounce it. I'm going to have my potential Irish citizenship revoked before it's even arrived if I don't start getting the pronunciation of these Gaelic words correct at some point in the very near future. So Mihal, not Michael or Michael or even Michael. It's Mihal Martin. Mihal Martin. The Irish Taoiseach, I think I've got that right, has confirmed in the last 24 hours that Priti Patel complained to his government that Ireland's welcoming policy towards Ukrainian refugees would allow them to reach the UK by the, trademark Daily Mail, back door. So that's been blown up now, hasn't it? That's gone. How's she going to be able to claim that if we're allowing people to apply simply with a passport and an internet connection? It's disgusting. It's beyond funny. It's also getting pretty close to being beyond analysis. It's just so vile, so corrupt, so dishonest, so deceitful. What day is it? Thursday. When was Liz Truss saying that we can't sanction people because Remainers have made the Lords too difficult? Monday. What day is it? Thursday. When did Priti Patel say that everything was going swimmingly and our system was fine and nobody was being turned away from it? Monday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. U-turn, reverse, 180 degrees, abandonment of the previous position, toss a coin. One of them shouts heads, the other one shouts tails, and then when it lands, they do a lap of honour. It is so transparent, so pathetic, so nation-shaming, and so disgusting that I sometimes wonder whether we're going to be able to keep up the necessary levels of attention-paying and criticism to deal with the sheer scale of manure being shovelled all over us on every single day. It's 11:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And I'm going to ask you a question I've asked you a few times this week, I think, a few times this fortnight. I want you to tell me what you think of the people who are responsible for this refugee policy. The columnists, the commentators, the broadcasters, the politicians, the writers, the people who have spent most of the last decade trying their best to scare you rigid about the prospect of desperate people fleeing war coming here. How do you feel today about them? Because they are desperate for you to forget. They are desperate for you to believe that they are acting in good faith when they call for better policies to be introduced or when they call for Priti Patel and Liz Truss, but never Boris Johnson to hang their heads in shame. How do you process that? How do you deal with it? It's the same people that flogged you Brexit, but we don't need to go there today. I find it incredible. I find it... Oh, hang on, wait, important information. John Bercow is a bully. OK? Just keep making that point. Apparently it's really important and it undermines any valid, honest, completely fact-based critique of this current government if you forget to mention every 10 minutes that John Bercow has been found to be a bully. Don't add that Priti Patel has as well, and that when Owen Paterson was found to have breached these standards, the response of the current government was try to rip up the rule book under which he'd been found to have acted corruptly. Don't mention Owen Paterson and Priti Patel when you're talking about John Bercow. And whatever you do, don't mention Boris Johnson when you're talking about Liz Truss and Priti Patel. So here is the question. They got the refugee policy they wanted. In fact, it isn't yet as violent and disgusting as it will be if the Nationality and Borders Bill gets passed. So the direction of traffic was exactly what they ordered. What do you think they're actually complaining about today? 0345 60 60 973. Control our borders, close the back door, control immigration, keep them out, leave them in the first safe country they get to. All of these people, all of these lies have been bombarding you for the best part of a decade. And now some of the same people responsible for some of the most rancid, racist rhetoric I hope I ever have to hear are either undergoing the mother of all Damascene conversions, or they're pretending to care about these people despite the fact that they bear personal responsibility for the introduction of the policy that is persecuting desperate Ukrainians from here all the way to the cities of Mariupol and Kiev. So how come? Give me your explanation. Why today are they pretending, or perhaps honestly believing, that something rotten is going on when it's exactly what they wanted, exactly what they called for, and exactly what they told you we all needed? It's 11:18. And relax. I have to keep an eye on my blood pressure at times like this, but it's really as if the boy in the crowd pointing at the naked emperor has been vilified and criticised and poked and prodded and teased and slapped by the crowd, and now suddenly the whole crowd is going, yeah, that emperor, flipping heck, naked emperor, over. I find it astonishing and honestly quite hard to process, because the level of hypocrisy that's on display now from people with public platforms is actually almost impossible for me to fully appreciate and understand. How can you spend years calling for refugees to be treated with contempt and then get cross when they are? That's the question I'd like you to try to answer. Oath, what do you think has happened in the last 2 weeks that has prevented people who claimed they wanted Ukrainians to be treated like Ukrainians are being treated, to complain about Ukrainians being treated in the way Ukrainians are being treated? How do you make sense of this? 0345 60973. So the system when you woke up this morning was this. You need to create an online account on the Home Office website and fill in a detailed application form. You then need to upload proof that your qualifying family member has permanent residence status in Britain, such as the copy of the Home Office vignette in their family member's passport. You then need to upload proof that they had been living in Ukraine before January the 1st this year. These are people who are possibly sleeping on park benches at a train station in Budapest, all right? You then need to provide evidence that you're related to the qualifying family member in Britain, such as birth certificates or marriage certificates. If documents cannot be provided, applicants must explain, and I quote, why you are unable to do so. You're beginning to wonder why we've only processed 1,000? Translate all above documents into English and upload them to the website. Remember, we've spoken to people whose family are thankfully not quite sleeping rough. There was one woman, wasn't there? But that was still on the other side of the Ukrainian border. You need to book and attend an in-person appointment at a Home Office visa application centre in Poland, Hungary, Romania, Moldavia or France, so that officials can take biometrics. That involves fingerprints and a facial scan. I don't know whether they're carbon dating anyone's teeth to check that they're telling the truth about their age, but the people complaining about how Ukrainians are being treated up until very, very recently were calling for things like, well, can't we carbon date their teeth to find out how old they really are, including the Daily Mail, which is also on the bandwagon of expressing performative unhappiness and rage about the refugee approach to Ukrainians. This booking system, I'm told, frequently crashes, and there are reports that the earliest slots available are in 2 weeks' time. They're not just reports. We've spoken to these people, and some of them were further away than 2 weeks. Normal visa requirements for a TB vaccination certificate have been waived. Some applicants have been mistakenly asked to provide them, like you carry that around, and wait while the application is decided by caseworkers in the UK and security checks are carried out. So that was the state of play this morning. 2 hours later, it was announced that as of next Tuesday, if you've got a passport or an ID card, then you can apply virtually without having to go to a visa application centre. So, unless I'm wrong, here's what you now have to do to come here as a refugee. You need to create an online account on the Home Office website and fill in a detailed application form. You need to upload proof that your qualifying family member has permanent residence status in Britain, such as a copy of the Home Office vignette in their family member's passport. You need to upload proof that you had been living in Ukraine before January the 1st this year. You need to provide evidence that you are related to the qualifying family member in Britain, such as birth certificates or marriage certificates. If documents cannot be provided, applicants, i.e. you, must explain why you are unable to do so. You must translate all the above documents into English and upload them to the website. And then you must wait while the application is decided by caseworkers in the UK and security checks are carried out. So as I read it, The only thing that's changed from that horrible process is the necessity of attending an in-person appointment at a visa application centre, which you will not be amazed to learn have been farmed out to private sector companies in Romania, Moldova, France, Poland or Hungary. I thought there was one in Sofia in Bulgaria as well, but perhaps I got that wrong. So there it is. There is your... that is controlling immigration. That's the list. There it is. That's what you wanted. So why is the Daily Mail cross? Let's focus on the Daily Mail, actually. We've probably given them a bit of a free pass this week. They've got depraved on their front page, describing what's happening in the country from which refugees are finding it almost impossible to get to this country. And if any newspaper or media organisation in this country has done more to bring in precisely the refugee policies that are currently being enacted in this country, it would be the Daily Mail. So why is the Daily Mail complaining about the policies that they have spent the best part of 2 decades, in their case, demanding? Your thoughts, your theories. I don't think we'll be able to read the mind of the people responsible for this rancid and frequently racist rhetoric, but we might at least be able to speculate. Let's start in Leeds. Sarah is there. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. My first-time caller.
Welcome.
I just felt I might be able to offer an explanation. Just by way of explanation, I am absolutely anti-Brexit and would open the borders to any Ukrainian who wants to come in.
Yes.
It's just an accident of birth. I'm here and they're not, you know? So that's where I stand.
Absolutely.
However, just sort of thinking it through, as some people who may have those views were not imagining that the Brexit mindset would be imposed in a wartime Europe. Therefore, you know, trying to be reasonable to people who voted for Brexit, maybe they didn't imagine that we would be turning people away who are fleeing a war-torn country.
Is it fair to bring Brexit into it so quickly?
Yes.
It's a slightly ironic question for me to be asking somebody, but you mentioned it first. You started it.
I did. And I think, unfortunately, we have to talk about it because people are... I think people who voted for Brexit are now saying, well, I didn't vote for this.
Yes.
Well, you did. Unfortunately, you did.
But
I also appreciate they didn't imagine this would happen. So our government...
But that Breaking Point poster made it pretty clear, didn't it? The one that Nigel Farage unveiled just before Joe Cox was assassinated by a white supremacist terrorist?
James, I agree, but I'm trying to put a kind head on this morning in the spirit of trying to understand what people think, and I would like the government to reflect that maybe people's minds have changed because the situation has changed, and therefore they need to change. I was so impressed. I don't know if you saw yesterday in the House of Commons, Alex Shelbrooke, who's my local MP, he stood up and ripped into the front benches of the Tory front benches and said, you need to stop coming here and saying things are happening and go and make them happen. And I am 100% behind that. Stop putting flags on your Twitter feed. Stop saying things are happening and get people who are fleeing war, people who just because of an accident of birth have been born there and not here, get them over here.
I think you speak for many, actually, and I'm still such a snowflake that I balk slightly when I hear Brexit being brought into it by others, even though I do it all myself, because I'm sure there are plenty of people who voted for Brexit who hate what they've ended up visiting upon this country. Many of them are already prepared to admit it, but then you've got the others, and what unites them? I just focus on the Farage fringe, if it is a fringe, as opposed to the silent majority, which is what the character kept telling us it was. I mean, why are they changing their minds now? Why will Ukrainians not bring us to breaking point? There's 2 million of them. It's a much bigger exodus than any that we've seen in Europe since 1945. Why won't Ukrainians bring us to breaking point? 0345 6060 973. And quite a few of you crossed with me for suggesting that the Daily Mail's been punting this angle for just 2 decades. You point out, as I have told you, back in 1938. You know what they were complaining about in 1938? The Daily Mail? No? Yeah, the influx of German Jews. Plus ça change. Michelle's in Rotherham. Michelle, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I kind of agree with Sarah from Leeds there, but what I don't think is that I don't think minds have changed. I think what's happened is people are now seeing that refugee doesn't necessarily just mean brown and black people that are Muslim or that are different culturally, that it can actually mean white, mainly Christian, European. Well, and I think that has really challenged people's opinions about what a refugee looks like.
Is it that simple? Is it that simple?
I kind of think it can be, yeah. I don't think that these rules were necessarily designed to keep out, like Sarah said, they weren't designed to keep out Europe.
So even when these
war.
people end up on the right side of history, they're doing so for racist reasons.
I think that there is I think the difficulty is that there were racist reasons at the base of the refugee sort of bill.
Yeah.
But now that that's kind of being exposed, everyone's kind of like running away from it because you can't admit that it was done for racist reasons, but that's how it's kind of looking now.
Why can't they admit it? It would make life a lot easier for everybody if they just would. If they said, I'm really sorry, I was persuaded by people like Farage and Cummings and the rest of them that the foreign people were the real problems in this country, including refugees. I know they deliberately conflated people coming here to work as nurses and lorry drivers, who I was persuaded were also a problem, and then they conflated them with people fleeing war zones and famine and natural disasters. I think I may have been a little bit racist. I'm very sorry. Please, can we start again together from scratch?
Can't possibly do that, James. Not in this day and age. You know, people have complained about political correctness going mad for absolutely ages.
Yeah.
But when they are actually confronted with, this actually is racism, that, you know, they see racists as terrible people and they don't see themselves as terrible people.
Which is how you can come out and write. You could write an article today saying, it's awful how Liz Truss and Priti Patel are handling this crisis, without realising that they are doing what you actually wanted, what you called for. And don't mention Boris Johnson. Leave the big dog out of it.
Oh, no, don't mention him.
Don't mention Boris Johnson.
He's St. Boris. He can't possibly be touched by any of it.
It's incredible. And there they are, shilling away with their tiny little Boris flags and avatars. And I would mention again, it is absolutely correct that John Bercow has been punished for being a bully. Now do Priti Patel. It's 11:32. Holly Harris is here with the headlines. 11:36 is the time, and already I have to chip off one of the things that I thought had been improved. I took my information from Breaking News, reported about an hour ago, and it said that from Tuesday, Ukrainian nationals with a passport or ID card will be able to apply for a visa entirely virtually. That, I'm afraid to tell you, is not true. Just a passport. So Priti Patel has told MPs that only Ukrainians with passports can apply online. Still incredible hoops to jump through, more hoops than any other country in Europe is imposing upon these poor souls. But an ID card will not be enough. Those without a passport will still have to get their biometric data taken at a centre before coming to the UK. The biometric data test, if you like. That's what you wanted. So how do you account for people who are complaining about having a policy they've spent years, and indeed many people, I think, correctly arguing this Brexit was a price worth paying. All the bad stuff about Brexit was a price worth paying for having a refugee policy like this one. Right? Because we could do the freedom of movement before. We could have introduced much more requirements. You knew this. Getting out of the Dublin Agreement, that might have been tricky. Getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights, that might have been tricky. Passing the Nationality and Borders, but that's it, isn't it? There it is. Oh, boy. Don't laugh at me for being slow if you got there before I did. That's what the Nationality and Borders Bill is designed to do. All right, pay attention. This one sings. So they're all sitting around. They've all acknowledged how desperate the situation is. Look, lads, Jacob Rees-Mogg has been reduced to asking Sun readers to come up with reasons why we did that thing 6 years ago. Literally asking Sun readers to write in with suggestions of things that they might be able to do that they couldn't do before Brexit. Sun readers to date have come up with diddly squat. Big surprise there. Well, they're probably more across the facts than Jacob Rees-Mogg is. So we need to come up with something that we genuinely... So they lied about the vaccine rollout, you know that, saying, well, we couldn't have done that if we were still in the European Union. Brackets, don't mention that we were still in the European Union when we did that. Complete lie. Couldn't do that. We can't keep wanging on about being world-beating when we're clearly not, because every now and then a journalist pops up with the guts to actually show us the numbers. And then people like James Cleverly have to go, well, I don't think we should actually be making comparisons with other countries. So we need to come up with something. This is it. I've flipping done it. We need to come up with something that we genuinely couldn't have done if we were still in the European Union. If we don't give these people something soon, even they might start turning on us. We have to come up with something that we couldn't have done unless we were in the European Union. And there is the Nationality and Borders Bill. OK, well, let us introduce legislation that makes us possibly the hardest country in the world, bar North Korea, for a refugee to get into. You can see them high-fiving each other over the table, except the guilty ones who just sort of pretend that they're pleased and look at their shoes, because that's how their families came here. or their grandparents. That's it. You've gone and done it. By Jove, I think you've got it. We'll introduce legislation that we couldn't have done under the European Union, because when people like Winston Churchill envisioned the European Union, it was designed precisely to protect peace in Europe and, in the event of war, to look after people fleeing it. So let us make the United Kingdom, let's make Brexit Britain the hardest country in the world for people fleeing war to get into. Or at least in Europe. That's it. Let's make the United Kingdom the hardest country in Europe for refugees to get into, and then let's serve that up to our base, who are desperate for something they can point at that we couldn't have done while we were still in the European Union. And also the bonuses, think of all the Remainer tears when we're turning refugees away at Dover, or where we're sending them back from Calais to go and have their eyeballs scanned in Moldova. They thought it was a vote winner. That's it, isn't it? So why can't they just do what every other country in Europe is doing now? Wave the visas, not the flags. Answer, because it would hold the Nationality and Borders Bill below the waterline. And the Nationality and Borders Bill is Plan A. That's the next election right there. We have become the hardest country in the world for refugees fleeing war to get into. And we couldn't have done that if we were still in the European Union. Even Nigel probably take a minute off from recording cameos for anybody who asks and throws him 20 quid or whatever the figure is these days. Even he'd probably take 10 minutes off from recording cameos for kids to come out and say, this is why we did Brexit, this is what we wanted. The United Kingdom has become the hardest country in Europe for refugees to get into. And we couldn't have done that if we were still in the European Union. And that's why they can't do the right thing this week, because it would absolutely destroy the master plan to present the British public with a Nationality and Borders Bill designed not only to make the United Kingdom the hardest country in Europe for a refugee fleeing war to get into, but also to revivify all of the racism, xenophobia, exceptionalism and breaking point rhetoric that propelled them into Downing Street in the first place. I've got Miss Jack coming up at 12. It's only 11:41, but I think I should be allowed to go home now. That's it, isn't it? Right there. That's it. What exactly have you done that we couldn't have done when we were in the European Union? Answer, I've made the United Kingdom the hardest country in the world for refugees fleeing war to get into. And that's going to win us the next election, lads. Go on, give me a ring, tell me I'm wrong. Kieran's at Heathrow. You know Kieran. We used to call him the van driver. Now we call him the sage. We call him the Nostradamus of European politics. You were crossing the channel, 100 times a year when Dominic Raab still hadn't worked out how important the crossing between Dover and Calais was, despite being Secretary of State for Brexit. Kieran, welcome. What have you been up to? What are you up to?
Right, well, I've been abroad 3 times this week.
There you go.
Loading to Paris now. I just got back in from Brussels yesterday. There's so much to talk about. It first started 2 weeks ago when I helped out 2 Polish drivers getting aid out of the UK at Dover who refused tickets to board the ferry. So they didn't have the GMR, which was introduced by the government.
Brexit red tape that we voted to get rid of, but which has increased immeasurably, making it hard for people who've collected aid on behalf of Ukrainian refugees to get it out of the United Kingdom because, quotes, we're controlling our borders, end quotes. Yeah,
I've had quite a lot of people who've asked me advice and information on how to get goods out. I have helped quite a few. Quite a few have been turned away because they seem to have been enforcing the law 101% on exporting goods that aren't for resale out to the continent. 3 of my friends have just delivered body armour and helmets to the border in Ukraine and morphine, and they were forced to go on almost... They were exploiting red tape, let's say, to get the goods out, otherwise they wouldn't have left, which was for a charity, bought by a Ukrainian charity, and they would have had to pay the VAT on the goods worth £400,000. But what I wanted to talk about... is
people coming in the other direction.
People coming in the other direction. Now, I got into Calais yesterday morning at 5 a.m. On my way to Brussels to load out the station, and I thought I'd swing by Calais, one of the hostels that many people are staying at, hoping to give 2 people a lift, because Calais to Brussels, as you know, isn't exactly well served by public transport. Eurostar does not stop at Calais, and it hasn't done for a long, long, long time, even though the government told you it did. You would have to go from Calais-Ville to Calais-Friethon, and then you'd have to get the train onto Brussels. But you need and can only go to the processing centre opposite Brussels Midi Station with an appointment once you've filled out the online application. So what I noticed yesterday morning when I was there, there was people coming in and out. There was 8 or 9 kids, probably 12, 13 years old, with one adult jumping on a bus, not knowing where they were going. There was a family of 8 that were in a VW Touran that had spent the night in the car, sleeping because they had nowhere to go. And the windows were full of condensation. And it was cold yesterday morning. I was in my van, and I've got a night heater in the van, and it was freezing outside. It was actually quite heartbreaking to see the people. I've listened to so-called armchair commentators on the radio all week talking about this. You need to go and experience it for yourself to have a sense of compassion about what these people are actually going through. They've spent 3 days on a border crossing, the ones we spoke about that ours might look like post-Brexit, to cross all the way across mainland Europe on free public transport and on trains, to end up in Calais, to stay in a hostel where you can see the ferries leaving every 20 minutes. You can literally see them. It's next door. And that's as far as they can go. I went empty to Brussels because I couldn't pick anybody up because nobody had appointments. Ironically, the processing place for the private company in Brussels was opposite where I was loading.
I saw you. I saw you tweet pictures of it. Didn't look very...
I was... I was outside. I thought I was outside. I met Misha, the guy that's famous.
Which one?
Not famous, the guy with the family from Hornchurch.
Yes, I do. He was there, was he, trying to get in?
He was there. He was there all day. He left at 8 o'clock in the morning from Calais, and he was still there at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And he was told he has to wait a few days to get the response back.
Well, that might be changing, because you've seen, I don't know if you've seen, it was announced that the requirement to get the biometric test was being lifted. As long as you've got a passport, you just have to jump through the various online hoops now, and you can do it all online. So the question now is whether or not that system will be up to sniff, isn't it?
I know what you're saying. The problem is, 1 day is too much for a family of 8 to sleep in a car.
And it's not 1 day, it's 4 days. Next Tuesday.
It's 4 days. No, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So 1 day is too much, even if they bought it in tomorrow.
And that's the point at which, if the application is successfully processed, that's the point at which it starts being considered. It's not the point at which the 6 kids sleeping in a car actually get to come to stay with their family in the UK. It's the point at which their application starts being considered, or the computer starts munching it.
Yeah, and what I noticed in Brussels, it was literally 3:05, and 2 people turned up to, obviously, they were obviously 5 minutes late, obviously because of public transport or something. The visa processing place in Brussels had closed and they were turned away. And the only place you can possibly go, you're in Brussels, it's an expensive city. These people got no money. There's nothing laid on for them. It's like Calais. Yeah. There's nothing laid on for people in Calais. They literally do it through word of mouth and through a community of where to go. So there's nobody directing people onto buses or trains or helping. There's nothing there. They're literally left on their own, because they have to navigate the red tape, go online. In a hostel, I'd be amazed if they'd got internet to use. And you've got to go online to do it, and then you have to apply, and you have to go and wait a few days.
And you've got to have proof that you've been living in Ukraine before January the 1st this year. You've got to upload proof that your qualifying family member has permanent residence status in Britain, such as a copy of the Home Office vignette in their family member's passport. You've got to provide evidence that you're related to that qualifying family member, birth certificates, marriage certificates. If you can't do that, you have to explain why you were unable to do so. You have to translate all the above documents into English and upload them to the website. And that's just to get to the point where they start considering your application.
James, I would like to just say, if anybody went to this hostel and you see the people that are there, it's not only heartbreaking, they're stopping these people coming in and they think they're a security threat. Women with children. And I was in Brussels yesterday and I saw a woman with 5 screaming kids literally crying walking across the road.
You've only said one thing I disagree with. You said anybody. You said if anybody saw this, they'd feel the way that you do. You're wrong, mate.
I'd like to think if anybody would see it, they'd have some compassion and understand.
So would I.
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Sad times, James. I'm good.
Good. Staying safe.
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, no. Cheers, James. Thanks
Right.
for the time.
Keep your nose clean. Take care, Kieran.
Yeah, take care.
Kieran,
Cheers, bye now.
one of the people who first started alerting as to what was on the horizon with regard to the mere commercial aspect of the path that British politics embarked upon 6 or 7 years ago, never mind the social and human aspects. But here we are, still puzzling over the mystery of why people who've got exactly the refugee policy they wanted are suddenly having hissy fits about it. And I think we've solved the mystery of why Priti Patel can't do the decent thing. It would completely scupper the Nationality and Borders Bill, which is supposed to be the biggie, the absolute humdinger of the Brexit benefit. What have you done that we couldn't have done in the European Union? Answer, we've turned the United Kingdom into the least welcoming country in Europe for refugees fleeing war. The epic miscalculation, according to many of you, and I'm still too much of a snowflake to fully sign up with this, but the epic miscalculation would be that the next tidal wave of refugees would look like us. 11:54 is the time. Mystery Hour on the way, after 12, or at 12, if you want to get involved in that, you know what to do, 0345 6060973. So here it is. You spend, I don't know, best part of a decade calling for much stricter rules on refugees, make sure they can't come here, close the borders, stick wave machines in the English Channel, start carbon dating their teeth to make sure they're the age that they say they are, let them stay in the first safe country they get to. I don't know what cliche you want to insert into that mix. And then you get it. Priti Patel, Boris Johnson, they introduce it. It's there. There you go. That's what you ordered. And you're going to have a hissy fit about it, somehow without mentioning Boris Johnson. How does that work? How do you end up cross about getting the refugee policy you wanted? I still don't get that bit. I get the next bit, the bit I've been puzzling with all week. Why don't they just do the right thing? Answer, because the Nationality and Borders Bill, which will make the situation we're currently in even worse for refugees, is supposed to be the jewel in the crown, or the only jewel in the crown of things you couldn't have done if we were still in the European Union, which they are increasingly desperate, of course, to identify. How depressing. I moved from being quite proud of my final understanding of the issue, to being utterly depressed about what it is I've come to understand. It's kind of the story of my life over the last few years. Let's go to Daniel, who's in Finchley. Daniel, what's going on?
Hi there, James. A couple of things. Firstly, just, you kind of posed the question why there's this differential between the response to the Syrian refugee crisis.
No, I didn't. That was implicit, really, but I'm more interested in the explicit question, which is, why are they so cross with the system they wanted?
Well, you've kind of nailed it, which is they're hamstrung to their Brexit policy and what that means for them. And one of your callers a few days ago, I thought you brilliant. That absolutely kind of crystallised for me the sort of very astute observation where he said that their being in power comes from a very small margin of the voters.
Mm.
And therefore they have to pander to those because they're...
Why don't they pander to the people who hate racism? There's probably more of them. Less likely to vote, is it? It's a slightly glib question, but I do mean it.
But then you're looking at the broader smorgasbord of issues which they may gain on that.
And they lose the support of the right-wing media immediately, don't they? Of course.
And all that they're wanting to do, unfortunately, is hang on to power, as opposed to necessarily delivering what's going to give the best solution. But I do think it's relevant because it does form a broader point as to why there's been a difference in response, which is that on the whole, people are products of their environments and experiences, so the narrative that they're exposed to.
Yes.
And if you have a look at what's happening in Ukraine, I think for a lot of people it's really clear-cut. It's very obvious.
Goodies and baddies. It's got a Second World War binary nature to it, yes.
It has, but also because we all hear whatever's going on with our echo chambers and whatever we listen to, that narrative is really clear and really loud. So it's really easy for people to pin their flag on that. Whereas if you look at what's happened with Syria...
Too complicated.
Less tangible, less obvious.
Maybe could have been clearer, but when you've got ISIS on one side and Putin-supported Assad on the other side, and then a tiny Free Syrian army briefly, and tragically not proving very effective and confined to a relatively small corner of the country, who are the goodies there?
But just by definition, when you're having to say that, there's a whole load more nuances in there.
No, I know. You're right. So if you're fleeing Syria, because if you stay there, you're either going to be killed or conscripted by either ISIS or Assad's army. Well, no, we could have made that clearer, Daniel, I'm afraid, because one of the rhetorics, some of the rhetoric the racists are reaching for this week is, oh, well, it was young men coming out of Syria. We could have explained why. We could have done a better job of explaining why young men flee Syria and stay in Ukraine, because there is a fight to be fought in Ukraine. You stay in Syria, you're going to be killed or conscripted by either the ISIS terrorists or the Assad government-supported terrorists.
We could have explained it. I think you'll be really careful not to underestimate the importance of that differential in clarity. So as an example...
Yeah, if it needs explaining, it's already a much harder mountain to climb than the one that doesn't need explaining.
And as an example, I know this may not be that obvious, but if you look at what happened in the outpouring of grief when Lady Diana died,
yes,
there was a kind of a collective energy and consciousness that everyone could get involved in.
Never mind all the facts and all the detail, just relish and revel in the feeling, the sort of pure emotional hit that provided. I wouldn't join you necessarily in that parallel, but you're more than welcome to make it on this programme. I think, maybe that is it. If it doesn't need explaining who the baddies are, then even the most rancid right-wing racist has to pick the side of the good.